actual Senate bill, but they would vote on the reconciliation package, and the rule would say that that vote deems the Senate bill to have been passed. The Senate bill then goes to the White House. He signs it, and it becomes law. Then the reconciliation package goes from the House over to the Senate, at which point the Senate could either take it or leave it. Whether or not they pass it, the Senate bill has still become law. So that's a big fear among liberals in the House, is that they're going to pass this Senate bill on the word of the Senate to pass the reconciliation fixes, and the Senate will pull the football back. The last institution in America that you want to trust to take any action is the United States Senate. So Nancy Pelosi said yesterday that she was asked what kind of commitment she wanted from the Senate, and she said, oh, I don't know, firstborn son. So they're not going to move forward until there is some kind of a blood oath from the Senate that they're going to accept anything that comes from the House over to the Senate. But as Pelosi said yesterday, and as she said also on Friday, that will not include a public option.
Now, on this issue of the public option, we heard Pelosi in that clip saying the Senate does not have enough votes. Senate leaders themselves have said they don't have enough votes. First, they said we don't have enough to stop a filibuster, but now they would just need 50 votes, and they're claiming now they don't have the 50 votes. But you did an analysis of Senate commitments. Talk about that issue.
Yeah, the funny thing about having progressive media up in the working in the United States Capitol now is that we can go out and count for ourselves. We don't have to rely on what the White House says about what the count is or what the Senate says the count is. And along with some outside groups and some other progressive reporters in the Capitol, we've been canvassing every Democratic senator, throughout the institution. And as of a few days ago, we got up to 41 commitments. Now, on top of that, you can add people like Tom Harkin, who's a strong public option supporter, Jay Rockefeller, Bob Byrd. Other people have made comments that were positive about the public option in the past, Mark Warner, Herb Kohl, and you very quickly get up to 52, 53, 54 votes for the public option. So the question is not votes in the Senate. The excise tax on insurance benefits has maybe 5 votes among Democrats, yet that is going to be able to pass. So it's not a question of votes, it's a question of effort. The administration, since the summer, has been uninterested in the public option, and so it never wanted to make the effort. Now, there's another interesting question on the House side. So while Pelosi is able to say that the Senate dropped the ball earlier this year, there may not actually be the votes in the House without an aggressive effort from the White House. Now, they passed the public option last year, but that was with these pro-life, pro-public option Democrats. So you're losing a lot of these Stupak votes. And so in order to replace them, you have to move to the right and pick up some blue dogs who might only support the bill on the condition that there not be a public option. But that's all guesswork. The basic point is that the administration just isn't interested in it, and congressional leaders don't want to take the time that it would take in order to get this accomplished, because they're afraid that any additional time puts healthcare reform in jeopardy. They just want to get it done and move on.
Ryan Graham, we just have a minute left, and there is another issue on the Hill. Senator Christopher Dodd rolling out his new framework for a comprehensive bill to crack down on Wall Street and plug the holes in our patchwork of financial regulation, but that's not exactly what it's doing.
Well, what this actually shows is that there's a real distinction in social policy between health care and banking reform. If you do a little bit of health care reform and say you insure 31 million Americans, but it strengthens the private insurance industry, it might doesn't include a public option, it's not everything that you want, it still does insure 31 million Americans, and it can plausibly save people's lives. Doing weak bank reform is useless because it's not going to save anything. You either have to do tough bank reform or you do no bank reform at all, because a half reform is going to be something that they're going to be able to poke holes in, and you're going to have a crisis regardless of whether or not this has gone through.
So he's gutted his own proposed
Consumer
Financial Protection Agency.
A lot of the consumer groups are actually somewhat okay with his proposal. It's being housed in the Fed, but a lot depends on whether or not the Fed has any actual authority over it. He's claiming yesterday that the Fed will have no authority over it whatsoever, that it's just renting space inside the Fed. And then we said, well, why are you putting it in the Fed? And he said, well, the Republicans won't vote for it otherwise. So it's kind of some weird shell game that's going on. And at the same time, you have this board of bank regulators over top of it that could veto it, but they could only veto it with a 3/4 vote. And so it's sort of like I dare you, bank regulators, to veto a consumer protection. That's not going to happen in the next few years, but maybe 10 years down the road, they might come back and start vetoing consumer regulations. But regulation is always evolving as corporate America tries to capture it, or as it's pushed from the left. So getting this in place might not be the worst thing, and that's why no Republicans are supporting it at this point.
Ryan Grim, we want to thank you for being with us. Senior congressional correspondent for the Huffington Post. This is Democracy Now! When we come back, we go to the border, to the continued deaths in Ciudad Juarez. Stay with us.